We have Sadato. Regardless of why, does the delay weaken or strengthen the Islamic Republic?
Does a delayed attack on the regime in Iran weaken or strengthen the regime?
Yes.
Okay. All
Is
right.
that self-explanatory? Yeah.
Yes. Thank
Especially
you.
in light of the recent developments with the arming kids, and I think they're going to become like cannon fodder maybe for the first wave of protesters. They're just going to go out there, create mayhem, and
So,
that's possible
so
because we gave them time, right?
you want to give like a context. The context is that the regime is arming the Iranian people, and you think that they're going to be just there to buy time for the regime forces. That's your theory.
I feel like the strikes being delayed, the U.S.
Mhm.
and Israeli strikes. I know we have no control or understanding of why it's being delayed, but is it benefiting the regime, or is it like because I've heard you give arguments that it's weakening the regime. Obviously, the closing the strait has, or what is it called, the blockade. The blockade's clearly weakened them economically, and I know that's an important aspect of weakening the regime. So I think that's a good thing. I think they're getting weaker by the day because of the economic pressure. But there are also things that I'm hearing, like, for instance, like they're able to bring out more missiles from the silos. They're able to regroup. I don't know. So I was wondering if you could give some arguments, both on both sides, of what these delays are causing. Right?
Okay, so this is actually the answer is both. Does the delay weaken the regime? Yes. Does it also strengthen the regime? Also, yes. In some ways, it's weakened the regime. In some ways, it strengthens them. And the trick is to figure out in what areas it is weakening them and it's what areas is strengthening them, and do they cancel out, and how much is it on each side? Which side is more, right? So that's the trick. Okay, and so obviously if you want to list of ways that the delay is weakening them, obviously the economic blockade means the Islamic Republic is running out of cash. Do you have the less of a, when you don't have military operations, do you have more internal political drama within the regime, right? And that causing division among them. What else? Is the most important one is the economic and the political division, right? So those are the areas where actually the longer you wait, the more regime hurts, right? So the areas that it strengthens them, first of all, they, even though you have blocked as much as you can, you haven't blocked everything. The regime is able to sell oil and gas from some, a much less than before, but it's not zero. It is enough to be able to use it to buy Russian and Chinese drone components and missile components, and rebuild some of its missiles. Have more. Remember, they make very cheap missiles, so it's actually the number of missiles and drones that they could build is actually faster than a lot of people realize, right? So that is, it doesn't take that long for them to get a whole bunch of missiles and drones, because remember, they're not going for precision, they're not going for a lot of damage, they're going for just being annoying, and that's commercially that's really painful for the world. You don't have to actually cause a lot of damage and have a lot of precision to be able to, I don't know, close the Strait of Hormuz or cause economic devastation to UAE. Okay, because the missiles and drones that you send, for example, to the UAE, they don't have to hit their target or be extremely devastating for people to just leave the UAE or people not to invest in the UAE. Okay, so that's why you could basically build as that really fast. So that's one area that in this time they're working on, that is helping them, so they could use this time to recover on that. Another thing is that a lot of the number that we hear that the missile capabilities of the Islamic Republic. So let me tell you the bad side of this, but also the good side, right? And we hear like 90% of their missile launching capabilities was taken out, right? A lot of people assume that that means that 90% of their missiles and launches were destroyed. That's not the case. The missile cities that they have under layers and layers of granite under the mountains, it's actually really hard to drop enough bunker busters to get to them, right? So the reason why we got to 90% reduction into their missile launching capacity is because they bombed the entrances to the missile cities. It's not like the whole missile cities were basically completely were destroyed and caved in. So that means that the launchers and the missiles were there and they were still available to use. One good thing that we heard is that because they managed to close every single entrance to these missile towns, many people within these missile towns died slowly because they suffocated because all the holes to the missile towns were completely shut off. So they died in very slow, painful deaths right in there, right? So that's a good news that a lot of Iranian people enjoyed when they hear that. But it also means that all the Islamic Republic needs to do to get a lot of its missile capability back, and apparently they have done that, is to just reopen the entrance to the missile cities, right? And they have done that already. So that's the bad news. But the good news is that it's also easy to just close them again, right? So once the military operations start again, so what's the point of these missile cities that you're like, oh my God, they got the missile cities back? Or okay, but you could just once the military operations start, you just go boop and you close the entrances again, right? Apparently, like the bunker, but like it takes a lot of bunker busters to go. Eventually, we drop enough bunker busters on these granites, on these millions of years worth of granite that has been built naturally on top of these mountains. There's not enough bunker busters worth like that you could actually get all that deep into destroying them. But why even waste doing that where you could just use not very big missiles, like you could use a lot less firepower to just close them every time before your military operation. So all of a sudden you have, so they said that 30 out of 33 missile cities are now back, okay, by the Islamic Republic, are back and now available for use by the Islamic Republic. Okay, I think within hours we could close their entrances again, and right before the war it would be also not usable again, right? Jeffrey could tell me if I'm correct or not, but I think closing the entrances is easy. Getting to the missile city is hard, but closing the entrances again every time you need to seems easy. So that's number two, which is a good side and a bad side. Like the bad news is that they're opening, like we have satellite images showing that they moved enough earth from this entrances to the missile towns. We have also activity, we also detect like sound coming from these places and electricity being used and heat mapping and everything that shows that these missile cities are now operational, right? So that's the bad news. Another thing that they could do to recover during this time is to figure out what the fuck to do to suppress the Iranian people, given that they now have an experience. They never had an experience with an uprising in the millions. Okay, they never knew what that looks like. Okay, and now they do. So that gives them experience. And now all of this time that we were in ceasefire, they haven't been sitting around. They have been planning. Okay, they see all of their weaknesses. They see every place that they failed. They see everywhere where the Iranian people's uprising was getting close to getting really dangerous, and they're gonna adjust for that, right? They see what type of people within the regime were refusing to shoot at the Iranian people, who refused to shoot, who didn't refuse to shoot. They see if the militias that they got from outside were more effective at shooting at the Iranian people, into crowds of Iranian people, than their own forces. So all of that are points that they're going to use. And I think during this entire time, they haven't just been sitting by. They have designed new suppression tactics. So the Islamic Republic, the only thing the Islamic Republic is really good at and learns every time is suppressing and killing the Iranian people. And every uprising made them so, like every uprising of the Iranian people have made them so very much more effective at suppressing the Iranian people in the next uprising. Like they created entire institutions and entire intelligence gathering methods. Oh, and new operations and new set of skills and new set of positions specifically from what they learned from the previous uprising. And I'm pretty sure that in the past few months they have been doing exactly that. So that's also something that goes against us. So these are the things that the time we gain from the time, and those are I gave you the list on both sides, right? Again, it's really hard to calculate where that okay, so where does that put us here? But I think if on top of the military sanctions we have the naval blockade, sorry, if on top of the blockade and also Operation Economic Fury by Scott Bessent, closing off the financial loopholes and stuff, which again suffocates them, but doesn't close it completely, but suffocates them. If on top of that we have some really extreme military operations coming, that I think the balance is more in our favor than theirs. But the one thing, again, I'm going to use this as an opportunity to keep repeating myself again. The one thing that very, very much tips everything to our favor is arming the Iranian people. You get the most bang for your buck if you just do that. So that's my response. What do you think, Sadato, about that response?
Yeah, thank you. I feel better a little bit. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Do we have some? Did Jeffrey put a 2 in the chat? Because I wanted to check if anything that
We
I
have
said was
and then Jeffrey for the responses.
okay. Okay, great.
Should I go ahead? Okay, now this hurts both sides. It helps both sides, right? If you want to take a look at the American side, why does this help us? Morale on the political side becomes lower the longer this goes on. There's more political upheaval. There's more economic. I would say that the economic pain for Americans is, I would say, orders of magnitude less than what's being suffered by the Iranians, but we get that too, right? And what are the pluses for us? Rearm and resupply, right? Just like they're taking the rubble out of their missile holes, we were restocking our missiles. And we were figuring out different tactics that we might employ, gathering more assets. Another thing that helps us on the time side is the longer this goes on, the more nations that depend on oil from there getting sick of Iran, right? Even China must be like, this wasn't supposed to go on this long. You understand what I'm saying? I think even Russia's kind of like, well, let's help them out because I don't want this to keep going, right? Especially Russia, because Russia has so many problems on its doorstep that releasing their oil basically does nothing because all the oil they want to sell, Ukraine is burning. So they lose. There's also a political loss for Iran in the international community, even though locally they don't care about what the people think. In the international stage, they're going to have less support, less strongly worded letters at America about the aggression because they're trying to feel it in their own economies all over the South China Seas and India and all these places, right? Do they get to the rearm? Yes, they do. So who gets more pain? They get more pain. They do get more pain. We can take the pain longer time. The problem with that is that the Iranian people also get more pain. It's more time that they can't afford to go to the hospital. It's more time that they have problems getting food, right? The suffering increases, right? I think that the biggest loss here is in the suffering side. That's where time hurts the most because we're not losing at a level where we're going hungry because of this. But in Iran, that may be the case. We're not suffering at a level that we are not going to be able to get medical assistance. But in Iran, that might be the case. So that is the highest point at which waiting hurts us because hurting the Iranian people hurts us. That's who we're going to help. So anything that hurts them hurts us. That's how I would analyze like why waiting is good and bad. Why waiting is bad is because it hurts the Iranian people. Why waiting is good is because it lets us rearm. And why it's good for them, they get to rearm. Why it's bad, they're losing political points everywhere.
Great points.
Jeffrey?
All very good points, all very good observations, a very good question. One thing kind of comes, the overarching kind of framework you might think about is competitive adaptation. This bears out in some of the things that were mentioned. So bunker busters versus missile cities, it's true. You know, the Mullah regime has spent 20, 30 years in creating what's known as hardened, deeply buried targets. That was what the Air Force defined it as in the late 90s and early 2000s. Which is also why they had the hardened, deeply buried target defeat program. There's different approaches that they looked at, from rods from God, nuclear earth penetrators, and or bunker busters and brilliant guided bunker busters and massive ordnance penetrators and all the rest of it. So to be sure, like we closed off, like Armin's not wrong, we closed off all of the entrances and destroyed what was readily accessible from the surface via airstrikes, and then did a function kill by closing everything off. And they indeed, those fuckers in the missile cities did indeed die a really shitty, painful death, which they deserve because they're evil assholes. Same goes with regards to uprising versus repression. Armin's right about that. Bad guys learn just like we guys, good guys learn. As far as like ways to delay, strengthen, and or weaken the United States-led Western and or anti-Mullah alliance and or the regime remnants. So the ways it'll strengthen Mullahs is it allows them preparation time. So the Mullah regime gets days to disperse their key assets, nuclear material, missile launchers, leadership bunkers, proxy command nodes. They've done this in the past. And I mean, that's, like competitive adaptation 101. It allows them to engage in propaganda and domestic rally effects, so the regime can spin it as the great Satan blinked, or Trump has weakened decisive. You already see that stupid shit being spewed out of whatever regime remnant's facial anus that masquerades as a mouth that has access to the media. It allows them proxy activation windows. So Hezbollah, Houthis, Shia militaries in Iraq and Syria, we're already seeing that play out. That's the bad news. What's the good news? So the ways the delays weakens the mullahs, or at least doesn't help them, and then I'll tell you the intelligence refinement angle at the end. So it allows diplomatic and coalition pressure. So President Trump has explicitly said this pause came at a direct request of Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE. These are key regional players who hate the regime and want a deal on the Strait of Hormuz, oil flows and nukes, right? So it's like tipping our hand to them, saying, you should come to the barbecue. You don't have to bring the steak, but we'd love it if you brought some sides. It allows us better planning in an intelligence window. I'm going to use that at the end. It gives us sustained max pressure without immediate cost. This is what Armin talked about with regards to, sanctions and seized crypto assets. Economic isolation keeps grinding the regime down. Internal regime stress, that's what Armin mentioned. The longer the threat hangs over them without imminent strikes, the more cracks can show. It lead infighting. Do we go maximum? Well, not we, forgive me, Hashem, I'm not those fuckers. Do they go maximum? Do they try to buy it out? There's public exhaustion within the IRGC versus cleric rivalry and all this other stuff. So here's the intelligence refinement issue. The delays allow us, General Keane wasn't lying when he says we're not staying static, right? The time we are using in the strategic pause is allowing us to engage in better targeting, which means the strikes when it comes are going to be have extra impact. Every day lets U.S. and Israeli fuse satellite intelligence, signal intercepts, human resources, cyber data. We're doing real-time tracking on, dynamic targets, on where they disperse centrifuges, moves enriched uranium, hidden IRGC commanders, or reposition their missiles. Rush strikes, miss stuff, or hit decoys. Refined intel means we hit the real high-value targets like we bullseye those assholes. Exposes Iran's adaptation. Well, as they're doing the stuff that they're doing, we're watching what they're doing. Competitive adaptation. I'm watching the enemy adapt and what he's doing to sit there and find out how they're thinking and what they do. Lower risk, higher legitimacy, and bigger impact. Precision from better intel reduces civilian collateral, which President Trump very much wants to do. I mean, he's not against hitting the mullahs. He wants the regime dead. He just doesn't want to harm Iranian people. I mean, he's pretty clear that he has a soft spot in his heart for those people. And it makes the operation look more surgical to the world. Gulf states have already asked for this pause when the strike eventually lands, or it's going to come with probably their blessing and less blowback, which means that's not going to be a sloppy punch. What does it kind of mean overall? Tactically, in the short term, sure, Mullah regime remnants are trying to use this to get a breather and dig deeper holes. Strategically, the delay is in many ways our force multiplier. While the mullahs are buying days of survival at the cost of facing a far more lethal intelligence-driven hammer later, And that's kind of where all that shakes out. Now, as far as how that's received from Iranian resistance inside, I mean, it doesn't make it any less frustrating or painful, especially for those inside the regime that are being denied access to anything via the regime cutting off internet and using kalinkas and bubble jammers and all the other stupid shit those evil fucks do. I just figure I'd give you that's the best overview I can give you off the top of my head in the limited time that you were gracious enough to give me.
Holy shit, that was amazing. Thank
That
you.
was great.
Thank you so much.
That was really good, Jeffrey. People also on YouTube are saying that was, yeah, loving your input, Jeffrey. Thank you for that.
Ian, if you could very quickly, please, and then we have a super chat.
You can skip me, sorry.
Okay, we got a super chat from Roman Viking saying the war is expensive. How to make it cheaper? I'm going to sound like a broken record. I think that's a good question. And I think we actually did the mathematical calculation of this with Ali. And the best way, again, saying it again, the best way to reduce the cost of the war is to arm the Iranian people. It's actually amazing if you actually go look how the calculation of everything changes. Everything changes. And if you do the calculation of the amount of damage you could do to the Islamic Republic for every dollar that you spend on American weapons, those dollars spent on weapons to be given to the Iranian people to fight against the Islamic Republic as the boots on the ground that they are, will completely change the calculation. I see Jeffrey put a 2 in the chat, so maybe he also wants to add some points to this. But that's my number one answer. I'm sure there are other ways, but that's my number one answer. All right, Jeffrey.
So
Thank you for the super chat. Yep, sorry, go ahead.
no worries. So two things. When it comes to the conventional military phase, right, us striking the Mullah regime and or remnants and regime remnants assets, the reason we used our long-range strike munitions was, and we targeted strategic radar and air defenses to allow us then to use our air assets and less costly munitions, not the least of which is JDAMs and or GPS guided general purpose bombs, which we have by the hundreds of thousands regarding the kits and millions regarding the bombs. So there's that aspect, right? The other part, and to Armin's point, arming the Iranian people. So if you're doing, say, kinetic track 2 material support, as it was envisioned, and it's done coterminously with two other lines of effort. One is naming His Highness Prince Reza Pahlavi and the transitionary government as the official government in exile to set up the legal environment so that you can do this legally. Then liberate all the oil tankers in the shadow fleet, bring them to U.S. ports and or allied ports, where then His Highness's led transitionary government can sell to us and our allies. That gives them $15 billion to sustain track 2 material supports at a revenue neutral, in some cases even a positive manner for the U.S. taxpayer. And then it gives him the resources to say spend $7.2 billion to train 20,000 highly trained, lawful, unconventional fighters, which after 8 months is able to sit there and be dispersed throughout Iran, vis-a-vis 156 companies broken down to 8-man hunter-killer teams to engage in counterinsurgency and anti-death squads, hunting down and slaughtering besieged and IRGC remnants very quickly. Oh, if you want to talk about like shooting things down, directed energy and weaponized drone swarms is where we need to go.
Awesome.
Okay, next to respond, we have Sketch.
That's exactly where I was going. If we're looking at the calculus of defense from drones, from these other materials, there is a lot of effort being put. We talked about this before, but because we have a merit-based system, there was already people using their entrepreneurial skills to delve into these energy weapons. Some of them are microwave weapons that we've had for, I don't know, about 20 years, right, Jeff? Around there. And pulse energy weapons, much better than the ones China has. And these are the weapons that are going to be the future. A lot of people have been making much ado about nothing with these missile batteries, and we're running out and we're going to run out of missile. That's simply not true. If anything, this war accelerated our defensive capabilities when it comes to that kind of thing. It would make our domes stronger. It's going to make the Golden Dome shinier. And we might get a platinum dome. I don't know how the way it's going now. It's going to be great because we have gained that knowledge on just the economic power of using lasers and microwaves and sometimes good old turret that can shoot down a drone. Also, Ukraine has become very important because of the things that they've been able to do. They've been able to hit in the heart of Moscow right now, right? What they have been able to do with a drone tech is amazing. So when it comes to offense and defense, the cost calculus has changed drastically from January this year to anything before that. Like we're changing where everything is going.
Awesome.
Okay, finally to respond, we have Richard.
Richard.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Perfect. Okay. I just wanted to also mention in terms of countering the ground strategy, whether that's ultimately arming the Iranian people or U.S. limited ground invasion, it's probably worth noting that the resources that the regime has been publicizing in terms of training the pro-regime civilians indicates their lack of confidence in both the out-of-country malicious and terrorist groups and their own besieged and military forces in countering that. So it's probably worth factoring that into the strategy later.
Okay, Jeffrey, close us out, please.
Yeah, Richard nailed it. I mean, the fact that the Mullah regime remnants is arming the very minority element of the Iranian citizens with AK-47s and RPG would signal to me and most other analysts that the regime remnants is conceded or not confident in surviving the conventional military phase of liberating Iran, and they're trying to set up the environment to wage a protracted guerrilla campaign against a post-conventional military, post-Mullah regime environment. So Richard's not wrong, which is why it's also important to arm Iranian people and or to train those lawful unconventional combatants. Well done, Richard.
Sorry, BT. Just one thing I want to add to this really quickly, and then we could go to the next topic. One thing I haven't seen other people consider is arming the pro-regime Iranian people might also be an IRGC versus IRGC play as well. And we're talking about the type of IRGC that think that the pro-regime Iranians who have maximalist demands are more in line with what they want against the IRGC, parts of IRGC that want to be more flexible to the Americans so they could survive. Arming pro-regime Iranian people who have those maximalist designs will give the parts of IRGC that do want the maximalist demands to continue an upper hand. So this is something that we should also consider. But I'm not saying it is the case. I'm just saying it could also be part of the calculation here.